And if everyone does not, if you do not want to be on the recording, just mute, darken your screen. So thank you very much. Okay, so I would just like to quickly introduce Tom Barrasso. He's been Sustainability Director for, Tom, is it 1.5 years now, something in that range? So
yep,
yeah.
something in that range, just about 1.5 years. So sort of settled in, sort of figuring out still what's going on and sort of moving ahead with a bunch of different things.
Yep. And Tom has been kind of meeting with us at CAB regularly. I'd say every 3-4 months, something like that, to update us on what he's up to, and it's been very helpful. And the big news now is a grant that Tom has obtained that all or most or whatever is going to be applied to the 2023 update of Brookline's Climate Action Plan. And the update, brief story on that is that in 2017, Brookline became a signatory of the Paris Climate Agreement, and Paris asked everybody to the next year, 2018, write a climate action plan and submit it to them at Paris, which Brookline did. But the other request is every 5 years to do an update of that. Well, 2018 plus 5 is 2023, next year. And this is a major project that all of us in Brookline will be working on. And Tom, I just wonder if you could tell us the status of where all that is at.
Sure. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to back up just a little bit and give you a bigger picture of sort of some of the major things that I'm working on, and then I'll delve into that. Is that good?
Great.
Okay. So I started a EV fleet study with Weston and Sampson as the consultant. That just got kicked off. I've been on vacation up in the White Mountains doing some hiking, so I literally just got back. So before I left, I gave them some instructions, so I'm hoping to catch up with them this week. And part of that is I want to try to avoid the sort of ad hoc nature of what we've been doing, looking at the sort of EV fleet electrification for the town. And in the bigger picture, look at the overall infrastructure for both the town fleet as well as the community at large. So that's a tall order for how much money we actually have to put into this, but we're going to try our best to at least get on a really good footing, especially for the fleet. So that will involve all the different departments and work closely with DPW and the controlling forces that do most of the buying for the municipality to sort of get that off the ground. So that is underway and hopefully will not take a seriously long time to sort of get rolling. I've started to help out Cheryl Snyder on the hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan now needs to be tied to the climate action plan. So it's a good time that we're doing sort of the update. It's a good time that we're doing the bringing together of those multiple plans. So there's an emergency management team of which I am a part, which includes fire, police, Cheryl, that's her department. So she's leading that effort, DPW, buildings. So we're all in there together trying to figure out how to best deal with sort of large-scale natural hazards and try to get that into a plan that integrates really well with the climate action plan. The aggregation contract is going to kick off in January 23. It begins with the December meter reading. So we have a new contract with NextEra and NextEra Energy, and that we just had an amendment get hopefully signed off today, and that will roll out. And I've been working with Good Energy to get the word out. Susan as well on some things. We're hoping to be on the Tommy Vitolo show on local access cable to sort of do informational rollout as things progress. There'll be a mailing. I just okayed some letters to go out today, so you'll be seeing a lot of information about how that's going to effectively look at how the pricing is going to change because of what the marketplace is doing. But we're still going to be in much better shape than a lot of people who are not in an aggregation program. Also, there'll be 100% offerings that I know, John, you were in on some of those meetings. I think Susan as well as Tommy Vitolo, Good Energy, myself, and Mel Kleckner when he was still here. So that program looks really, really solid. So with the MVP grant, I would like to share my screen if I could.
Yep. Try it just right now, Tom. Tell you, if everybody else who's not speaking could mute yourself, please. Yeah, we can see it. Looking good.
Excellent. Let me see if I can. Good. Okay. So hopefully you've not seen this before. So I prepared this to sort of give you a descriptor of what we're going to do with the MVP grant. So last year I put in for a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant, an action grant under the MVP program. And that was entitled Brookline's Climate Crisis and Resiliency Plan Update. So the plan is not to sort of take our climate action plan and gut it. It's basically trying to bring it up to speed to the kind of things that have changed since you enacted it. And as John mentioned at the beginning, how things have morphed since the Paris Accords. So the Calling Center required some of this stuff to occur too. So it was worth looking at that as a sort of review document to sort of design what I needed to do for the grant. We've got a target date of 2050 in all of our documents and part of our understanding at the administrator level, which now needs to get pushed back to 2040. So that's one of the serious things that we need to look at, as well as different the warrant article for climate emergency in 2021. And the strategic plan that I came up with when I first came on board, which hits a lot of the items that you just mentioned as working groups, which included transportation and buildings. So I think we're on the right track to sort of look at this now. So we applied for $75,000. We got that much money. There's also $20,000 of in-kind services, which is basically my time and staff time that equates to 20 grand. And then $5,000 match from the town itself, which will be used in the back end of the program. So about 100 grand its totality to actually spend. So again, the mission is to update the cap, conduct an action item because it's an action grant. We actually need to do something. So we wanted to try a pilot tree planting program in an environmental justice area. So I plan to work closely with the Environmental Justice Office, as well as the DPW and Open Space Director to try to figure out where we can actually do that. It's a modest program. I think we've got enough money, hopefully, for 5 trees. So the core of any MVP is the public engagement. So working with Climate Action Brookline, working with ZAB, working with other folks as well as we bring these people into different meetings is critical to the overall structure and how we sort of structure the grant application. The work groups that you just mentioned, I think would actually fit really well with this. We haven't designed those yet, so this is perfect input that I'm getting from you tonight, which is exactly, again, my areas of focus. Transportation, buildings, electricity generation was pretty much high on the list too. So I think that would work out pretty well. We need to figure out where we are. So we need to do some baseline assessment. We can do that through our MEI database, the Massachusetts Energy Insight, which is part of the Green Communities, which we update on a regular basis through billing cycles with the utilities. As well as an end of the year report that probably will kick off the next week or two. We really need to prioritize. I think part of the complaint or really the criticism of sort of the last effort was that it was too big of a laundry list and we really didn't get enough focus or prioritization out of that. So part of this exercise will be to look at what we really need to rise to the top, which again, I think corresponds to kind of the things you were mentioning at the top of the meeting, which is trying to figure out our biggest greenhouse gas emitters and trying to tackle those. So transportation and buildings are definitely those 2 items. Once we do that, we can develop a realistic action plan, which we hope to have, again, similar to the EV study, sort of what can we do in the real short term? What do we need to look at overall and what the long term out to 2040 looks like and kind of how we can get ready to sort of progressively move towards that goal rather than, again, trying to do things in kind of an ad hoc manner. And again, implement the pilot for the tree planting in a particular EJ neighborhood. So the next steps that I'm working on before I left on vacation and picking up where I left off is to get a request for proposals out there. Unfortunately, because it's $75,000 of money, we need to actually put out an RFP. So that process is a little bit long. So I've been working with procurement and legal to sort of get that ready. I received a draft today from Dave Giannakakis, head of procurement. So I'm hoping to get that out onto the street within the next week or two. Definitely coordinate with DPW and open space on the forestry plan and coordinate with all of you folks. I've had a really good meeting with Mothers Out Front maybe about a month ago. So that went really well. And again, I meet with you guys regularly as well as ZAP. So right now we're underway with the RFP. Once we get the consultant on board, which will probably be an array of people. So Weston and Sampson will be in the mix again, probably be a C group, maybe GZA and a couple of others. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback. And the price is the price. It's $75,000. So we don't really need to worry about the price. It's more about how people are going to tackle it, what kind of experience they have in MVP grant and MVP organization. So that's it. I will unshare my screen and we can sort of talk about that and get some questions.
Pat, please. Yellow hand. Pat, go ahead. You're muted though. Yep.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for that. I had a question about the EV fleet study and specifically about the infrastructure, because, you know, we have so few public chargers, and I'm wondering if that is part of that EV study. Because as more people in the condos and apartment buildings in town are getting EVs, it's harder and harder to charge. And I'm wondering if that is part of what you're looking at.
It is, but it may be in a very limited fashion. I was only able to scrape together about $20,000 to sort of pull this off. So it's a kind of that scope is pretty broad to try to do with 20 grand, but we're going to try our best to do that. And so that's one of the items that we really need to look at, especially with respect to the utility and trying to understand, you know, where things are at the utility level to figure out where we need to plan for expansion of these different areas. We've been asked, and at least since I've sat down over a year ago, it's like, oh, we want 500 stations and we want them all over town. It's like Eversource is really not ready for that. We've had some issues with things like the fire station, the police municipal building, the garage, which needs some major renovation as well. So trying to coordinate that kind of infrastructure scheduling with whatever we've got for capital improvement, as well as what we're going to do in the sort of general conduits for how Eversource is going to get us more electricity and more power.
And is there a deadline?
For the study?
Yeah.
As soon as possible. So again, 20 grand doesn't go that far. So we just kicked it off about a week or so ago. So it should not take more than a month or two to sort of get something finalized.
Wasn't your,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought a couple of years ago, was Maria, I think it was Maria who told us this, there was a plan to put some DC fast charging on Beacon Street. What's the status of that?
That was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do this study. And that happened pretty much when I first arrived. We were talking about that project. Eversource had some difficulties, and then we ran into all kinds of difficulties. We couldn't put the fast chargers where we wanted to put them because of other concerns, infrastructure on Eversource's part, right-of-way issues that we had with respect to MBTA, MWRA, as well as Mass Highway. So that's again part of how to, we need some systematic way to look at where we're going to deploy these. And it can't always be, oh, we really want one over here. It really has to match up in the short term with kind of where is the availability right now to sort of put some of this stuff.
You know, If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. We're getting some weird feedback. Tom, building on that and being a little more, I don't know, historical, I guess I'd say, I'm no expert in how gas stations got built everywhere in the United States, decades ago. But I suspect it was basically oil companies wanting to sell more of their product. So my question is, why do municipalities have to feel we're kind of pulling teeth to get some of this stuff? Why is it that utility companies or I don't know, are just not falling over themselves to put EV chargers everywhere?
It's an odd question, and I've asked that as well, and I never get a good answer from anybody. And obviously, they're upgrading their infrastructure all the time. But personally, I don't believe that they put a lot of their profit money back into the infrastructure, and that I think is really critical. That's something that I think the Department of Public Utilities is aware of, and I think they're looking at that now. But I have been talking with some oil companies have sort of moved into this venue as well. So I recently had a conversation with Shell Oil, and I can't remember what they're calling themselves, but they've essentially got a division of electric fleet adaptation, and they're thinking of that. Where do we put these places? And my first thought, being a sort of a brownfield revitalization person for many years, was looking at gas stations that were now defunct and closing them down and then turning them into EV stations of some kind. And that's sort of Shell's idea, but they're also looking at acquiring other properties. And part of that, what they're offering, is a turnkey solution. And I think that's the right way to go. But as a municipality, turnkey solutions and dealing with one entity is always really tricky, especially from a procurement standpoint. So I think that's a hurdle that we need to get over. But the conversations I've had with Shell's division is like, hey, sign up with us. We'll come in, we'll handle all the infrastructure, and you sort of walk away and you've got what you need, which would be the easiest short-term solution rather than trying to do a lot of build out ourselves or go contract to contract or procurement to procurement. So it's just starting in the formulation stages to sort of get these ideas gelled, and then up through DPW, who controls the assets, and then into the administrator's office to see kind of what his approach might be. I had a very good kickoff meeting with the new administrator as well, so I'm looking forward to sort of doing some work with him.
Any other questions or comments for Tom? David Lowe.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for arriving late. I was driving back home and tried to get it on my phone, but it didn't work. Same link, but didn't work. I'm wondering what the status is of the solar rooftops that we approved some time ago. It was on schools mostly. I'm not sure if any of those have been installed yet.
They have. I think we're only missing a couple. I think the Heath School, I think, has not been completed yet. I can get you a list of exactly what's been done. Again, since I don't control the assets, I'm usually not in the sort of direct and sort of general oversight of those projects. I get them kicked off or get some funding if I can. Matt Shortsleeve of Solect Energy is the primary contractor on pretty much all the school buildings that we've got. And I know we had 6 of them that were in the queue when I first started. I think we slowed down on one of them because of supply chain issues during COVID. But I believe they're all done from, if I can remember off the top of my head, I think it's the Corain Aquatic Center is done. Believe the high school is done. We're looking at Pierce, and of course the new school under construction. We're talking about that as being ready to go for infrastructure once it's built, but again, the array's not up on that. But I can get you a complete list.
No, that's all right. Paying attention.
Don Weitzman, yellow hand.
Tom, thank you for all this. In terms of town EV fleet, I'm just curious, would you know whether the police department considers any EV vehicles acceptable for their fleet these days?
Yeah, they have. I think there's a Maverick. I can't remember the name of it, but there's definitely one that's been approved. If for some reason, it's like Wisconsin has the final say of approval for some of these emergency response vehicles. And once they approve them, then people start to buy them. So there's a number of things that are actually on the state bid list that are ready to go. Getting them is a different story because again, everything is sort of slowed down with respect to supply. So I don't know if the police department has a new vehicle yet, but definitely things have been ordered. I actually won a grant last year for 2 EVs and 1 dual charger. And the EVs are on order through DPW. I can't remember which model that they're getting. And we're still working on where to put the EV charging station, which will be somewhere in the town hall area. So either in the main parking lot or close by. Health department, I believe, also has a vehicle on order.
Are you aware if the police department is in fact open to EV vehicles?
Oh, yes, everybody is. It's just a question of what's available and what make and model will actually perform the function. I think the police have it a little bit easier because they're sort of not doing some of the heavy work. So I think on the fire department side, I haven't seen too much that's available yet. I know there's some fire trucks, pumpers that are available in California. I think they're $1.5 million a piece. They look like they can do the job because they've got a backup system that uses, I believe it's diesel. So it's sort of like a hybrid and it can get the job done.
Thanks.
If I could elaborate a little bit. First of all, Tom is correct. One of the good things that's happened is that grant that he got, has two EVs for the engineering department in DPW, which is great, particularly because for them to see that there's some money available. Jesse Gray and I also pushed on Aaron Galentine a little bit, who's very much on top of this. Very much wants to do this, and because of that, they also added. They weren't planning to, but they added an EV pickup truck for the water department. And again, as Tom says, the police department is pretty open to this idea. Of course, there's been a problem. We've been going through police chiefs about 1 every 2 months, so I'm not quite sure where it stands. The vehicle that they could use is the Mustang Mach-E. For instance, New York City bought 100 of them, and there are some other places around Massachusetts who have been buying these Mustang Mach-E's. And actually in Massachusetts, there are a few that have bought Teslas too, although we don't really expect that. But as I say, I'm not quite sure where that stands because Richard Allen, who was the acting chief, was very open. And I think he put an order in, so maybe there's one coming. And I say, and then as you've probably seen, the new police chief has already been fired, and so who knows what's going on there. The only other thing I'd say is that the fire department has not been very open. They talk about how in the long term they would like to do big trucks, which of course no one expects them to do that at any time soon because that's just not ready for prime time. But they had in their budget the deputy chief's emergency response vehicle, which used to be a Ford Explorer or something like that. And they had in there to get a Ford F-150 gasoline. And we were unable to convince them that, even though all the reviews say that the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is exactly like the regular 150, but it's all electric, we were unable to convince the chief that he should do that. So that was kind of frustrating. So there's a bit of work to be done here. But as I say, in general, more of the department heads are supportive than not, for sure, and they're working on it. And with Tom's help, hopefully we'll be making some progress.
Susan, yellow hand.
So Tom, you had talked about getting input from the community about the climate action plan. Could you talk about that a little bit more, kind of how you're thinking of doing that?
Sure. I can't remember precisely how many meetings that we said we were going to have in the grant application, but there will be some large scale meetings, not to the extent, I think, from what I've heard in your original climate plan. I think those were massive meetings. I think we'll do something a little smaller scale. Again, we've only got 75,000, and that does have a time clock on it. So we've got to pull that off within, I think, a year and a half to sort of get that underway and done. So I'm looking to you guys to sort of help me organize that once I get a contractor on board. I think the focal point, again, will probably be the working groups, because that was part of the discussion I had early on, even when I first arrived, is that you were feeling that you wanted to reactivate those. And I think what you've outlined again at the top of the meeting fits really well with the grant plan. And kind of the things we need in ongoing efforts, whether it's Werner helping out with the EV strategy, or you guys helping out with transportation, especially with the new gentleman that's coming on board with the transportation experience. It'd be interesting to see how we can sort of tool that into the kind of things that we need. One other area that I continually ask for help on across the board is the economics and how to look at that. And I think a work group, maybe not playing fundamental role in the sort of grant that we need to sort of pull off now, but in the big picture of how to look at this stuff from the economic perspective is something that we don't normally see. Back in the day, I had a company called E Squared, and one of the E's was economics. It was economics and environment. And we looked at things where I had like maybe 5 PhD economists on staff. And, I'd give them a problem and they'd go out and figure out the solution. And that nobody seems to have. And you talk to straight up engineering companies that we have those in abundance, and those people who can work on resiliency, people working on greenhouse gas emissions inventories. But the economic piece of it as to how to explain to a city council, select board, how to explain to a mayor, how to explain to an administrator or fire chief, here's the economics of kind of how climate impact interrelates to that. And the easy answer is like, well, if we don't do this, then the planet bursts into flames. It's like that doesn't fly. We need some real sort of hardcore numbers that we can point to. That's why I'm hoping we can get, even with the limited amount of funds that we have for the EV study, if we can get some sort of a strategic plan approach that at least will show a spectrum of like, here we are, here's the immediate things that we can do. And then in the long term, here's the stuff that we have to hit on a regular basis. And that will inform the CIP, that will inform decisions that the administrator needs to make as to where we should be spending our money.
Let's see, Tom, actually, this is building on some question that Werner was responding to a bit ago, which is, I know that in meetings I attended where questions of emergency response vehicles, where can we go to EV electric versions of those? The concern of many town staff was that many of these models are brand new. And even though the manufacturer says they're fantastic, the staff would feel much more comfortable, especially given the hard use of the emergency vehicles. They have to work when police get an emergency call, that vehicle has to work to get them there, right? Can't have any doubts about that. And so there seemed to be a desire to kind of just wait a bit and let the the first models be out there in the field, work out the kinks, the bugs and everything, and only then would they feel comfortable in actually going ahead and purchasing these vehicles. And it sounds, between Tom and Werner, it sounds like you're saying that these department people are feeling more reassured about the reliability of these vehicles in emergency situations. Is that correct?
It really depends on who you talk to. And again, I don't want to step on the folks who know their job. I'm not a police chief, I'm not a fire chief, I don't fight fires, so I have limited understanding of precisely what they need. And part of the emergency response picture that's sometimes left out is that the mutual aid component of it. And I've had discussions with the fire chief about that. If something starts to go wrong, not just in Brookline, but in other parts in Boston, in places that we need to provide mutual assistance, then you might end up with multiple things happening at once, where it may not be, oh, get in the car, go to the fire, come back, charge, go to the next fire. It may be happening all over the place. If we look at things like the Boston the marathon bombing, things that happened in New York during 9/11, it's like those are major issues that don't happen all the time, but it's something as emergency planners that they plan for on a regular basis.
Werner,
As
were you going to
I-
talk about that issue?
Yes. As I say, Jesse and I have been in private conversations with a number of people about this. And I don't go out of my way to step on people's toes either, but I don't have to be quite as careful as Tom does. The police department has definitely been open to it. They, it's not the time lag in buying things and stuff can be a problem. And, we'd like to see more. They're a little more cautious, but they've definitely been quite open. And part of the reason is, as Tom mentioned, this Wisconsin State Police certified vehicles, and they certified the Mach-E, so people are pretty comfortable with it. Jesse is the real expert on electric vehicles, and my view, and I think his view, is that we answered every single concern that the chief had about using a F-150 Lightning for the deputy chief's response vehicle, but the chief didn't hear those.
Don Weitzman, yellow hand.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on Susan's comments about public involvement in the comprehensive plan. Brookline seems to be moving toward comprehensive plan effort with zoning and not just climate, but we definitely need to be a part of that. And I'm just wondering whether you are thinking strategically about how the environmental movement, climate change will be involved in that planning process.
Yeah, that's again a good issue that, again, if you guys bring it up from the outside, may fly better than me bringing it up from the inside. But that's definitely how to get all the different departments that have sort of this sort of overall master planning that's needed at the table, involved in all of these discussions. So you can't do housing without talking about climate either. You can't do infrastructure without talking about where people are going to live and how they're going to shop and where they're going to park their vehicles. So all of this stuff is overlapping, and it's sometimes tough in any municipality, which tends to be siloed, to sort of make sure that that's being discussed across the board. And I think part of the creation of this position allows me to do that, so I can sort of go from department to department and sort of figure out how to integrate this, or at least get people talking. I think we're kind of at that period where it's like, okay, the sustainability director position exists. We should be talking to him. And so you get invited to different meetings, and hopefully you have some input that you can actually get on paper and integrated into their plans. So it's definitely happening, and there's definitely a lot of crosstalk.
Tom, I'm told that you are what's called pinned, and I don't know what that is really, but you see the little thumbtack on your screen. Did you do that yourself? And apparently it may be blocking some people from seeing all attendees. Good, very good.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We're good.
I wondered why my head was so big.
Okay, great. Okay. I have a bureaucratic question on this for you, Tom, which is this: basically, let's see, the Paris Climate Action Plan update part of it. They want a submission next year, the 5-year update, part of their request, but they have no format. They have no formal questions. They have no formatting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But clearly it needs to be a practical document the town can use, that we advocates can use, and also that we can measure our progress by, et cetera, et cetera. So here's my question. I'm sure that the state granting agency has reporting requirements, probably format requirements and everything. Are you pretty confident that when you meet those requirements, that you don't have to do a separate set of, I don't know, written language or whatever to satisfy, to keep us happy and give us something we can work with? You understand what I'm saying? Have the organizers of the grant program, are their reporting requirements flexible enough that are useful to us as we move forward, as well as to them in evaluating that you're spending the money wisely?
Yes, that's a tough one. Yes and no, because again, on the bean counting universe of how you sort of report back to grants,
Yeah,
it's really all about like, did you execute what you said in the grant application, and you have the deliverable that you said you were going to do, and you spent the money according to what the state wants you to do. So that's pretty much all they're interested in. So the outcome is going to be, we have a deliverable that's going to be an updated plan, and we're going to plant, trees somewhere. And so when those two things are accomplished, and we've paid the correct consultant, and we did the procurement correctly, they're pretty much satisfied. So I think
Okay.
we're in the driver's seat in terms of how the thing needs to look. And I think that's part of what we need to do in the front end is figuring that out. It's like, okay, when we come out of this, again, we heard it with the last version that there was 2 laundry lists, we needed priorities. So we need to come out with the priorities. The measurement aspect, we asked that question in sort of developing the sort of scope of the grant, but that's always a tough one to do, and how to pull that measurement piece off. But that's something that we need to have. So whether it's, how many EVs have we bought over the years, and that needs to be an increasing number. How much electricity are we reducing on an energy efficiency side, and how much stuff are we actually electrifying? And so those are probably some of the key areas. And in conjunction, as this is going on, ZIAB's got another effort going on with Powered City to look at greenhouse gas calculations. So that may be, if they're coming out the other side as we're coming out the other side, or somewhere in between, that may be an avenue that we can look at and say, oh, how do we incorporate this into what we need to measure? So the measurement piece of it is something that we need to ask the question of. We may not be able to, again, fund it all under this one particular grant, but it's definitely something we need to be able to do. But from just a standpoint of reporting to ourselves internally, and then figuring out if we've got a metric to measure ourselves against to say, hey, we're meeting this.
Yeah, we definitely need that. And I super hope that something like the ZIAB Powered City census that you just talked about, I hope that can be one problem we've all had. We all complain about it, is different climate activists working on different projects and not always knowing what the other guy's doing, right? So the more of this that can be actually, accumulated in a single document, so that we all have access to, the better. So we know what everybody's doing, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I had a thought, and I think I just lost it, but on a similar vein, we do track progress on energy efficiency through MEI, through the Massachusetts Energy Insight. And part of that data is going over to the folks that are doing the greenhouse gas calculations. But how to look at that in this picture is still a little squirrely as to sort of how to figure that out. And I think the states realize that. So they're morphing the Green Community Program into something they're calling Green Community Part 2 or Green Community version 2, which will sort of steer away a bit from energy efficiency into more of sort of what we need to calculate for climate impact. And I haven't seen what that looks like yet. They've sort of announced that they're doing this, but we don't really know until they get moving on some of their stuff. So part of this is also trying to figure out how the state is moving forward, and then how to fold into our efforts into what they're doing to make sure that we're aligned again with grant eligibility, and also with the ability to track it.
And Mike, the fact that there's a completely new administration beginning, really have a major impact, hopefully a positive impact on
Yeah,
that.
that's been a major issue across the board, whether it's at the state level or the federal level. So we got the federal level sort of secure for another couple of years. So we're going to have a new sort of state administration. And, again, you talk to people now and it's like, oh no, the program's okay. And, we'll see on the other side. But that really depends on who gets in office and then what their priorities are after the election. And what sections survive, what programs are elevated. We had a discussion today about PACE, whether PACE will still be around or whether PACE will change into something else. We really won't know until the new things get settled in and new directors get put in those positions.
And PACE, by the way, is something that David Lescoyer has mentioned a concern about and contacted Tom. And there's been a discussion between Tom and Cara and a few other people, both in town administration and in state government, apparently, just over the last couple of days. So,
Yeah.
and we'll hear more details about that if it turns out to be a real thing. So, so I'll tell you what, it's now almost 8 o'clock. Are there any, let me just just very quickly for Tom is, this issue that folks have mentioned about community engagement. I mean, the vision of some of us about the potential of this new update for next year is how can we make this a major event in town involving town government, but also all the residents and even the schools and school kids and stuff. There will be kind of two aspects of it. One very formal and quantitative measurement, precise objectives with timelines, et cetera. But the other, just a kind of a community excitement, aspect of it. And I just hope we can get all of that going.
Yeah, I agree. And part of that is being able to sort of reach out to all these different groups. Again, when I met with Mothers Out Front, even though I have met with them sort of in the recent past, a lot of the folks in that room didn't really realize what was going on and how many things we were working on. So it's always that question of like how much information that we can get out. So I know I've been working with Kathleen Scanlon on the ZF newsletter. So when we get that up and running, I think we'll have another avenue to get stuff out there. I think coming to see you guys every once in a while, as I do, I think is critical. I think this is probably one of the bigger audiences that we reach, unless we have a really big ZF meeting with a lot of external attendance. So figuring out how to do this again on a regular basis, which I think we got covered, is great. Reaching the schools is always tricky. So again, that may be something that we need to do through different folks. I've had a conversation with the public library, and they wanted, they had the big, it's like, let's talk about all sustainability, which is like, that's too big an order. So we're trying to narrowly focus them down a little bit so that the discussion makes a little bit more sense.
We've got some CAB people who also are working on many projects in the schools. And so, Tom, we can find ways to kind of hook you up with many of the climate activists in the schools.
Very good.
Very good. So, all right, as I say, it's now just about 8 o'clock and Tom has been very forthcoming. Any final questions or comments for Tom?
John, it's almost 6 o'clock.
All right. Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Okay. Almost 6 o'clock. So we're all in the same time zone. Okay. Sorry about that. Tom, many thanks. And you're welcome to stay.
Looks like Mr. Ross, do you have a question?
Yeah, I sorry, I came in late. I must have missed something. But I thought the original PPA for the schools and so on included the multi-service building. And I don't think anything's happened there about the project. Is that right, or am I wrong?
Is that the Municipal Service Center?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe there's some plans for that too. I'd have to double check and see if they've actually done any work there, but I know that's come up with Erin. I've talked with Erin a couple of times on that because I think they wanted to use part of the area for some canopy as well. So and expand out, because the roof space there is not that big because there's a lot of infrastructure on top of the roof, but I'll double check and see if I can get you a complete list of what's going on for solar projects.
And what Blake is asking about, by the way, is put solar panels on the roof of that building. So that is what PPA, purchase power agreement for solar panels. Yeah, for folks who may not know. All right, Tom, very good. As I say, you're welcome to stick around. Our next speaker is Michael Berger, and our next topic. Oh, sorry, I wanted to say one thing. Your pilot about trees. You might want to talk with the Mothers Out Front tree people who are working on the idea of a Miyawaki forest. On that, you got that already?
Already talked with them, yeah. And again, how all these things will interrelate with DPW and open space, since again, they control the assets. We'll need to figure that out, but that's on the table as well. So we had an excellent meeting with them about that subject.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much.
All
Okay,
right.
very good. All right. Thank you, Tom. As I say, you're welcome to stick around if you like. And our next topic is the area of artificial chemicals in Brookline's environment. And our speaker on that is Dr. Michael Berger, who is a chemist, teaches chemistry at Simmons. And I know, Michael, that you're also a member of the Artificial Turf Study Committee that town meeting set up a year or so ago. And I wonder if you could give us an update on that and possibly other chemical issues in town as well. You're muted, Michael.
It's nice to see you all. It's been a while. Yeah, I'm an analytical chemist, and I've been very interested in doing environmental risk assessments actually before I came to Simmons. So I don't think I'm prepared to speak in general about chemicals in Brookline. I mean, we've got lots of them, and that could be good and that could be bad, but I can speak and answer any questions about the artificial turf. I also do quite a bit of work on the Muddy River, and that of course is very much in Brookline's interest. There was a recent oil release at the Brook House into Leverett Pond. It's still ongoing, so that's a problem. DEP is on that, of course, but I have students who are working on this the issue of phosphorus remediation, because too much phosphorus creates algae blooms, and when it empties into the Charles River, you get cyanobacteria. When that empties into the Boston Harbor, we actually end up with red tide. So there's a whole responsibility chain of, and that's just the example of phosphorus. But I can give you an overview of where we are as a member of the committee for the artificial turf. One of the things I realized right away is that there are a lot of smart people in Brookline who know a lot more than I do about certain aspects of chemistry. You have a toxicologist, and we have people who have been involved with chemistry of these materials. And so I've learned quite a bit. I can share some of that. So what are the concerns of artificial turf? Certainly some of these, if not all, were raised at town meeting. One is the toxicity. What is the risk to our youth of artificial turf compared to natural turf? The other is injury. Artificial turf, as it gets older, it gets not as resilient, doesn't have as much shock absorbency, and so that can create a problem with injuries. I think actually that was one of the major concerns in Boston's decision. Mayor Wu decided not to have any artificial turf placed in the city of Boston. There were other issues too that come up, and these are impact climate change. and sustainability. One is heat. I mean, there have been few studies that have been done that show that many areas in Brookline, especially North Brookline, are heat islands, and heat is Brookline's #1 concern in terms of adaptation. It's not flooding, it's heat. So replacing things that are green with artificial turf is a problem in terms of the regional heat, but also for players, younger players. It can get quite a bit warmer over artificial turf than natural turf. And then there's the issue of recycling of the artificial turf. It's not a green process. So there's a lot of concerns. But on this committee, one of the things that I appreciated is pretty complex. When we say artificial turf, it's been around for well over 50 years. And there have been many different varieties and brands and constructions of artificial turf out there. And so when you talk about artificial turf, you really have to be careful about what you're speaking. Certainly the most recent iterations of artificial turf are way improved in terms of toxicity and shock absorbency, and but there are still questions that are out there. The other thing that I learned that's kind of interesting is that one size doesn't fit all for turf, for athletics. Certainly for picnicking, for young people, it's great to have, kind of for low impact use, it's great to have natural turf. But it turns out that field hockey, one of the requirements when kids go on to high school is they have experience playing on artificial turf. And since we don't have that facility, our youth cannot really compete in field hockey because of that. So I guess I don't want to ramble on too much, but I'd like to answer questions. But it's really complex. And I think where we're headed is to offer town meeting, a report to town meeting that kind of lays out a decision tree, a matrix of what kinds of things could be considered. So we have toxicity, injury, heat, recycling, and does it fit the sport? By the way, this last Columbus Day, I was out visiting my son and his grandkids, and they live south of Cleveland, about 20, 25 miles. And it's, I guess, suburban, but the fields are amazing. I mean, they're all grass. I mean, it's so nice. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's just a carpet. I mean, it's beautiful. But of course, they have the room and the space to do that. But it seems to be also a priority in the town that he lives, where outdoor sports are a major service to the youth and to, I guess, adults as well. But I'd like to answer any questions before going on.
Blake. Blake, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Is the $3 million budgeted for Skyline to replace the artificial turf there? And if so, is it going to be the same? What we notice, because we go there every day, is that it's older now and there's a lot of black stuff that flies up when people run on it, which we presume is just pulverized rubber, but we don't know. But
Right.
Any thoughts about that?
So I don't know the specific details. I do know that Skyline Park is going to have artificial turf. But it seems that there are different grades of artificial turf. The crumb rubber that you're talking about, I think that's out of the picture because that creates its own toxicity, not PFAS, but rubber is made from petroleum chemicals, and there are things like lead and other toxins. So it turns out that there are different grades of artificial turf. Some that have drainage, some don't have minimum drainage, some have very good shock absorbers and deep, a deep pad underneath, not chrome rubber. So the answer is we should buy the latest. If it's going to be artificial turf, we should buy the material that is deemed the safest for players and has not chrome rubber for sure.
Is there a process for making decisions on the replacement artificial turf at Skyline?
I don't know at Skyline. We're in the committee that I'm on. We're actually coming up with a kind of a decision tree for that, but I don't know how the turf at Skyline is or was being procured.
Mary, yellow hand.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation and work on the committee. I had a question about the different types of fields that we have in Brookline. Some are schoolyard fields that get played on by younger children and daycare people, and are not necessarily the heavy duty sports field. For example, in Lawrence, we have a natural field, and they've been able to, after 3 times, learn how to do natural field, regular grass fields better, and how to maintain them better. And it's lasted and can be renewed much more easily. I'm wondering if your committee has delved into the question of age-related appropriateness for this type of use. I mean, little kids are going to roll in the artificial turf, I'm dramatizing it a bit, but as I live near Lawrence and see a lot of multi-use from different cultures and different dogs and people, and it's a community space, but it's right next to the Lawrence School. Is that something that's been discussed or will be discussed?
Certainly the use is a key parameter in this kind of matrix of decisions. So for example, if Brookline decides that field hockey is going to be a priority, then it would be a small location probably where it would be, and it would be outfitted so that the sport could be played. But there are a lot of priorities. So there's a couple of, I guess, decision trails. One is, what are the priorities in terms of athletics and field use? That's not what our committee is looking at. Our committee is looking at, once the use has been decided, what types of fields should they be? So that's been our approach. I mean, we've left the prioritization by the town out of the picture.
About the weather, I don't know. I feel as though the weather is so unpredictable. You talked about heat, and what about the discussion about rain and taking fields out of use, and how hampered the teams and the parents of kids on teams feel about rain? And is that a reasonable position, or do we just have to face the fact that it's a trade-off worth making?
Yeah, I don't think the committee is going into that. We were set up for an analysis of really what are the risks with our artificial turf, and to report back on that. We've kind of broadened it to list a set of decisions that have to be made, or questions that have to be addressed. And we're still in the process for that. I would urge anybody here to attend I know, Mary, you've been at a couple, to attend the meetings, and we always take input. But I think our product, I think, is going to be the outline of a decision tree, basically. We're not making decisions on any fields, per se.
And who would be, Park and Rec Commission would be making that decision, or who
Yeah.
who would the ultimate decider be?
Well, if it's a field that's shared with a school, that probably would be a joint decision. But if it's I think Park and Recreation, that's their bailiwick, I think, to make those decisions. And our matrix or our framework would help inform them of making the healthiest and most resilient and climate-friendly decision possible.
Seems to be a political tension avid sports people that are really care about their kids and playing the team and playing as much as they can, as often as they can. And how does that political energy get fitted into the decision tree?
I think that sets the priorities of what kinds of things. For example, it may turn out that field hockey, for some reason, because there's so few players, or I'm making this up, doesn't get a high priority, and so we wouldn't build fields where they could play field hockey. But that's not the committee's decision. Yeah, that's a
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Don, yellow hand.
Michael, thank you for all this. Just an historical comment, going back to Blake's question about Skyline Park. The reason Skyline Park exists is because this had been the town dump. And going back about 20 years ago, I think we got an EPA order to cap the site. And I think that affects the reason about why it is, in fact, artificial surface rather than grass. I know that housing was not allowed on the site. It had to be a sort of temporary use kind of thing. I don't know how that affects going forward or anything else, but I thought people might be interested to remember that had been a toxic site that was capped.
Yeah, thanks, Don, for that. I remember that now.
Yellow hand.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for working on this. It's such a complicated issue. And where the intersection of public health and climate comes in, there's a lot of concern about the increased incidence of childhood cancers. And, the question of all the more chemicals that is in our environment at this point, how that's, feeding into that. And you can tell me if this is true, what we usually think about in the medical world is the deficiencies in the US where regulation of chemicals often comes when harm has already been committed or has already happened. Whereas in Europe, they do more testing prior to releasing these chemicals so that harm could be prevented. So I do get worried when I hear about new artificial turfs, because I realize although there's an attempt to make them safer, there isn't and you tell me if this is true, a careful analysis until problems start to crop up. Do we have it right in the medical field?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. That's a great point. So let me talk about the toxic concerns, because one of the main drivers for this field is PFAS. And that's kind of the chemical that everybody's concerned about. And it's interesting that PFAS is a very small part of the manufacture of we're talking just about the blades of grass, just the carpet part. And it's used as a release agent in making the leaves, the artificial leaves. And it's actually not a leachable chemical. It's kind of a chemical that's polymeric. And there have been studies that we've looked at that because other communities have had the same concerns we had, and they had some rather large studies done. And sometimes they found that the natural soil in natural grass has as much PFAS as the artificial turf, because PFAS is kind of raining down on us. It's in the water. We found it in the Arctic, and so there are a number of toxins that are probably in the natural environment as well. But for PFAS, I think what I've seen the toxicologists present is that that is not a major concern, because the ones that are proven to be water soluble or to be active are not in the not in the PFAS. In fact, Laura Green is her name. She's very knowledgeable, and she mentioned that a version of the polymer containing fluorine is used for surgical stitches and artificial hips. So it's pretty inert. And I think the medical community's kind of looked at it, not laid out in the sunlight, which you might say, well, does it degrade? It's been studied, doesn't degrade. But there are a lot of other chemicals like crumb rubber that Blake mentioned that turned out to be nasty stuff. And so that's kind of being discontinued. So we're still getting information. For example, the polymers that are used are not naturally green. Why is it green? I mean, what chemicals are in it? And I haven't gotten the information for that. I think this decision matrix we're coming up will make any manufacturer or company that's going to bid on a Brookline job, it's going to have to show some data that says that the data show that this does not present a risk. However, to your point, Pat, you never know. You know, we thought it was good. You know, just like in medicine, coffee's good, coffee's bad. Chocolate is always good. No, it's bad. So there are different studies, and it's very complicated. But at least for the for whatever we purchase, we can set up some criteria that the company has to provide data, and health would effects would be an important part of it. That's not to say it's a wrong decision. They never know.
Because then it's too late in a way.
It's too late. It's too late with the best knowledge we have right now to make the decision. I would prefer actually that everything be natural grass. I mean, I was just blown away in Ohio. It was just like heaven. It was great. It was just green grass, thick, green, luxurious grass. Now there could have been chemicals there that I didn't know they're using, but it was, you know, it's something that to go for. So an alternative would be to have a larger budget and maybe rent out fields in other towns. Also tough to do. Private schools, I mean, they're going to want us kind of muscling in, but, and I know, I think that Park and Rec has looked at this in the past. It's a difficult situation.
So can I just ask one more question? So when you say polymer, you're plastic, right? Is that right? Just
yeah.
And is that they're always petroleum products?
That's
a question.
Yeah, no, they're not always from petroleum, but mostly the raw material. For example, most of the backbones of the polymers are carbon chains with hydrogen or fluorine. The carbon hydrogen chains usually come from ethylene or octane or things that are fossil fuels. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Mayim, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for working on this. I want to ask you for some clarification, and you may have kind of gone around this. This is such a big issue, not just in our town, but in so many. And I've been kind of proud to say that I had the impression that, I think it was at last town meeting, Brookline sent it back to study, that we were going to do a big study on what was really better, could we keep up the grass and how much chemicals are involved there, and really step back and take a larger view evaluation of the whole situation. So I'm not sure how what you're saying relates to that, but then I'm not clear on what they actually decided or not. But maybe you could fill me in on that.
I think there were a couple of warrant articles in that last town meeting about artificial turf. And I think the article that we're operating under is really to find out what's known about artificial turf. Not to say, what would it take to do grass? That's an important question, but it's way beyond what we're charged to do. So it's a narrower scope.
Yeah, the two warrant articles under consideration at the last, I think it was the very last town meeting. One would have put I think it was a 3-year moratorium on installing new artificial turf in new locations in town. That was defeated. And the one Michael is talking about, which is to establish this study committee, kind of a literature review committee, mostly, I guess.
Right.
That one was approved. And that is why that committee was established, the committee that Michael is a member of. Michael, when is the report due from that committee? Isn't it fairly soon?
Fairly soon, November.
Oh, it's due for the November town meeting.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a in progress report, but
Yeah.
we'll have a report.
Great. Excellent. It is now 6:27. We're almost at the hour-and-a-half moment. I do want to say something that I just learned this afternoon, which is that it turns out that Mothers Out Front, statewide, it's called, I think that means Mothers Out Front Massachusetts, has a healthy soils group. I just learned about this, and I'm very intrigued about what they might actually do. Apparently they're going to have a meeting, it says perhaps this coming Monday, a week from today, I guess, at 6 p.m. on this very topic, the topic of artificial turf and artificial chemicals in the environment. This is hot off the presses. I just got an email to this effect moments before the meeting began. So I think we might all be interested in that. So Mayim, your yellow hand is still up. Is that from your past? Okay. Let me just, I'll say, I think any final questions for Michael or comments for Michael? So. All right, thank you. Let me just say that the next CAB meeting at this point, well, this is firm, which is Monday, November 7th. At 5 p.m. It will be our warrant article endorsement meeting. That is, I'm not sure that's the second Monday, maybe it is. No, it's the first Monday, but we bumped it early by a week because the Monday after that is just the day before town meeting. And we wanted to give petitioners for warrant articles a little bit more notice in terms of whether they receive endorsement or not. Now, here's the question, though. There are so many environmental warrant articles on the warrant this time. And in particular, there's all the complications of the 6 Jesse Gray warrant articles that we had a meeting last night of town meeting, the Green Caucus of town meeting members, and we didn't even have time to look at all 6 of those. So what we might want to do is have a supplemental meeting before town meeting, so we can give justice to all these warrant articles. We'll talk about this, I guess, at a planning committee meeting coming up right away. It's an issue of scheduling because the Monday before November 7th is Halloween night. And I don't think anybody would want to, I don't know how many people would come, and I don't want to overburden people with meetings. So I guess we have to figure out what to do about that. But very definitely the next CAB meeting, Monday, November 7 at 5 p.m., a warrant article endorsement meeting. So Don, are you, yeah, comment please.
And then continuing in December
could...
on the second Monday?
Well,
second Monday or
the
third
second
Monday
is November 14. I suppose we could do that.
December. December. What about
No.
December?
Well, by then, the town meeting begins on Tuesday, November 15th. November 15th. See, and these warrant articles will be dealt with at that town meeting session.
I'm
So-
just asking, what's the, or what regular pattern will return to after November?
Oh, well, second Monday, once a month, second
Okay.
Monday. But as we said at the beginning of the meeting, there is sentiment to have a weekly CAB planning meeting to deal with more the decision-making and the organizational issues. And that basically the second Monday meetings would generally be kind of content meetings, environmental issue meetings,
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
So John, I was not
Yeah.
able to make the Green Caucus meeting, and I'm wondering if you can give a very brief report of the reaction of the Green Caucus to those environmental, the climate issues, the Jesse Gray issue warrant articles.
Yes, basically what happened is that just super quick, a lot of the thing is that basically warrant Article 10, which is tree protection, not Jesse Gray, that has passed unanimously. All of the town bodies it's been at before. It will be dealt with by tree protection and tree planting committee at 7 o'clock this evening in 1/2 hour. It's been through all the tough hurdles, and I'm pretty sure the tree protection committee is going to like a tree protection warrant article. So that should pass very, very handily. And we're hoping for a very high vote at town meeting. The municipal golf course issue is a very controversial issue. That's why we had our tour this morning. It remains controversial. The Green Caucus meeting yesterday was not a voting meeting. It was merely a informational meeting. So folks had a general background on these issues. The snowplow issue, a timely, more quick snow plowing was introduced as an environmental issue. The main issue with that is the calcium chloride that is used, the chemical contamination issues of that. And another concern about that was that if we require that residents have to plow their sidewalks immediately after a storm, that might be very tough for elderly people, disabled, etc., to do. So I might be.
I was thinking
one.
specifically of
The Jesse Grays.
Jesse Gray articles.
I know. What Jesse Gray did is that, yes, I know the ZAB articles, there are 6 of them remaining. And essentially what Jesse did was talk about them in a global sense. And there just was not time to get into each individual article, the merits, the implications, whatever. And I feel honestly, and that was an hour-and-a-half meeting. And our CAB November 7 meeting will be an hour-and-a-half meeting. And so I think it's very important that we not, that we really look at each article before we endorse or not. And honest, be frank, what I'm thinking about is hour-and-a-half on everything else at one endorsement meeting, CAB endorsement meeting, and then perhaps another hour-and-a-half, perhaps separately about the ZAB, Jesse Gray articles. If there is time is marching on. So the Jesse Gray articles are all home rule petitions. So they're all very, very complicated. Susan, I couldn't hear what you just said. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think we need to wind up.
Okay. Yeah. So are folks interested? Last question I have then. Are folks interested in having having 2 warrant article endorsement meetings? Susan says no. So we would have to prioritize which articles we look at. So.
But that's just me, and I'm not a town meeting member. So,
Town meeting members in the group, which is Don and myself. Lee, you're a town meeting member. Perry, you're a town meeting member. Don, would you like to make a priority? Lee, you said you're muted.
Yep, I'm a town meeting member.
Should we look at all the Jesse Gray warrant articles individually? It's the only way
I
to
have
do them
looked
justice.
them over, but I don't know. I have to hear more discussion. It sounds pretty radical.
Yes, they are all big deals. They're all controversial. Yeah.
I just one more thing on this. I would like to say that Mothers Out Front had a session on those 6 articles, and it took half an hour. Lisa Cunningham did the presentation. So Yeah, they in the following week, they did a half hour on the tree, not a half hour, 15 minutes on the tree article.
Who presented at the Mothers Out Front meeting on the ZAB articles?
Lisa Cunningham.
They didn't happen to record it, did they?
I think they did. Yes, they
Okay.
did. They did. I thought it was an excellent presentation. And the one on trees was Olivia Fisher Fox, and it was also an excellent presentation.
Where would I find those?
Good question. I'll see if I can find out for you. I know
Okay,
they
thank you.
recorded.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would be great if you could give us the reference that we can do our homework with that video.
Actually, that's a really good idea. If people wanted to watch those recorded sessions before our session, would be very helpful. Diane, I bet Diane.
Diane, yeah, please, Diane. Yeah. And also, by the way, Perry Grossman is saying he can forward a link to some of these recordings to me, and then I can disseminate them to the rest of us. Okay, Bob Miller, we'll see you soon.
So Mothers Out Front is doing another 50-minute presentation. I know it's not this Thursday, so it's probably the following Thursday, or maybe in November, but we can get you the info.
And what will they be presenting about, Diane?
The climate, municipal climate empowerment plan warrant articles.
Okay, and those are the ZAB, the Jesse Gray
Yes,
articles.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, did you say that was a Thursday, or what did you say?
Yeah.
Upcoming?
Yeah, it's
Thursday.
Thursday at 10. I just don't know which Thursday it is. I know it's not this week. It's probably next week or the week after. But
Okay,
I can get you the details.
okay, very good, very good. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to keep this open for a few more minutes so I can get updated on the chat, but why don't we consider this the end of this meeting? And
Thank you all.
thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.